I love talking about survival. I am not a survivalist or anything like that, but I am really fascinated by the idea of like ancient technology and wilderness survival and preparedness. There's it's called like Ancient Technology YouTube channel where this dude makes like mud huts and stoves and stuff. It's really, really cool stuff. And watching that's like really inspirational. It's probably what got me interested in the idea of surviving in the wilderness anyway. Like, there's this YouTube channel where, if you're not familiar, a guy, he actually like takes mud and he like digs a hole and he puts wood in. He makes a hut. He makes like canopies and he makes like condensation water catchers. It's really cool stuff. And it made me think about like, what would you do when the end comes, the apocalypse? And so I saw this story from Fox News, an opinion piece. Will you survive the coming blackout? So this is from Doug McKinnon. He writes, there are many seemingly never-ending debates. Republicans versus Democrats, impeach versus don't impeach, capital punishment versus life in prison, wall versus no wall, legalizing marijuana versus not, self-driving cars, human drivers. Yeah, we get it. You got a lot of things to debate about. All of these issues are stunningly important right up to the second where cataclysm falls and creates a nightmare scenario that so many fear. Yeah, good point. Then marijuana will be legal for everybody. That cataclysm is a complete loss of electricity and every mode of convenience and survival we take for granted. Let's stop right here. I love this. Will you survive an EMP? This is like a really popular thing people talk about. Will there be a solar flare that emits a massive electromagnetic pulse that fries all of our electronics and then we're back in the Stone Age? Or will it be a man-made EMP device or an EMP from a nuclear device that wipes out our technology? If it did, what would you do? In the couple weeks following Hurricane Sandy in New York, there was no power in much of Manhattan. The Lower East Side was without power, and so the bodegas, their food was spoiling. If you wanted to go in, they had guards at the front of the doors holding like bats and like boards and weapons. One person at a time could come in, and they were very strict, like open and close the fridge because it's going to get warm quick. So milk's out of the question, meat's out of the question, canned goods, you're good. But it was actually pretty crazy because there was like phone booths were knocked over, cars were spun from the flood. It was really nuts to see Lower Manhattan this way, just to walk around and see the devastation. And my understanding is it was a couple weeks before power came back on. Fortunately, there was still power in other parts of the area in the tri-state, so food could still come in and people typically could survive. But there was a gas shortage for weeks. I could not imagine being stuck in New York with no gas. What do you think is going to happen when not only this stuff shuts down, but there is a loss of confidence in the system? Money means nothing at this point. It becomes worthless, and I assure you gold will be worthless. I always thought it was funny when you'd hear Jones say, like, buy your gold, they're coming for you. And I'm like, let me ask you a question, man. If everything just fell apart today, you saw a guy on the road, let's say you've got a ham sandwich, an extra ham sandwich, and you want to trade that. And someone's got a gold coin and says, I'd give you a gold coin for this ham sandwich. And someone else says, I've got a bottle of fresh, filter, sterile water. Which one are you going to take? The point I'm trying to make is, in that circumstance, okay, maybe you take the gold. But water will be infinitely more valuable than gold, especially in a major city. I'll tell you what, man, if you're in a major city when the apocalypse happens, you are doomed. It's going to be like 99% of everyone is wiped out because people are going to go nuts. They're going to be fighting, and starving people will do crazy things, I assure you. Let's read more, though. Let's get his thoughts on the matter. The largest red flag on the issue is, in years, just waved in South America. Last weekend, tens of millions of people in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay found themselves in a complete blackout. In one moment, they had electricity. The next moment, they had none. And they were catapulted back to the 1800s. Only much worse. People in the 1800s were not dependent upon electricity for their jobs, money, communication, internet, transport, education, security, medical, prescriptions, water, and their very lives. The national power grid of the United States is truly a mess held together with, as the joke goes, not much than baling wire and chewing gum. The average age of large power transformers in the United States is 40 years. 70% of all large power transformers are at least 25 years old. It's little wonder that, according to data from the Department of Energy and the United States, suffers more blackouts than any other nation in the developed world. The overall system is so weak, so taxed, and so vulnerable that in 2003, over 50 million people in the US and Canada were hit with cascading blackouts simply because a tree branch fell on a power line in Ohio. And I assure you, as time goes on, the numbers will only go up for two reasons. More people. So yes, more people will be affected. Simple math. But The aging infrastructure. Man, we need an infrastructure overhaul. Can't we do some kind of program like, I don't know. I guess we're in massive debt as it is. I have no idea how the U.S. pulls out of this one. But let's read on. Because the infrastructure is so antiquated, weather triggers multiple blackouts per year in the U.S. Blackouts which collectively cost the nation upwards of $30 billion in spoiled inventory, lost wages, and repair of the grid. Now I'm going to tell you something even scarier. Diabetics, people who are diabetic need insulin, and that's to be refrigerated, which means when the power goes out, these people are in serious trouble. So something interesting happened a couple weeks ago. I was at home. My van is now complete. We're going to be doing a video on it soon. I didn't have the van yet. It was almost done. The power went out at my house because the city was doing work on the power lines, and I guess someone made a mistake. The power was out for like an hour and a half. And I was sitting there like, well, I can't record my videos. I can't work. There's nothing I can do. Literally nothing. My laptops didn't have enough power to film and render, and I should have had them charged up, but I didn't. Didn't expect the power to go out. But I thought to myself, hey man, in the future when this happens, I got a van that's independent. It's off the grid. It's got solar power and it's got batteries. I could work from the van if the power goes out. That's one of the most important reasons I got it. Not because like the end is nigh or anything like that, but I think it's really important to have your own energy source that can sustain you for a short period of time in the event of a serious blackout. It's not even about the apocalypse. It's fun to talk about post-apocalyptic scenarios, but I'm not even talking about that. That's just for fun. That's just, people love pretending and video games and stuff like that, and it's important to be prepared. But what about a storm? What about this tree branch falling on a power line and shutting out power for how long? For 50 million people or so? They were cascading blackouts. I don't know how long it was going on for. This is why Lowe's sells generators. A storm hits, generator kicks on, and you go out your business like nothing's going on. This is extremely important for people who need to do work, but look, you are safer when you have a cell phone. This is a fact. If someone gets hurt, you are able to call for help immediately. So power is really important, but also in like the event of like a total blackout or some kind of, war or whatever, people underestimate the power of a cell phone. I was having a conversation the other day where someone said, yeah, but a cell phone will be worthless after the apocalypse happens because there will be no cell networks. And I said, no, it won't. You can film videos. You can take pictures. You can do calculations. You have a supercomputer. It might not have everything you need on it, but it's still a computational device that can help you. And I assure you, some of those maps in Google Maps are saved. So you might still have maps. But I'll tell you this right now. My advice, because I did this, download a survival guide and a map and anything else you might think to your phone. You'll never touch it. But it's like having a first aid kit. How often do you use it? Probably never. How often do you put a Band-Aid on? I got scratched by my cat. Didn't put a Band-Aid on it. I just washed it. Could have put a Band-Aid on it. I was bleeding. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But there are some circumstances where you really do get like a bad cut. I accidentally stepped on the side of my computer housing. Really annoying. And it was a pretty deep cut. Not so bad. Just needed a Band-Aid. But that's when I went to the first aid kit for the first time in years. So, phones can be really important. Now, the thing is, when power goes out, what do? This is why I also think it's great to have like solar stuff. And I'm not talking about prepping. I'm not talking about the end of the world. I'm talking about just having general preparedness stuff. And I think there's a stigma around this too. I think, preppers are so ridiculed for being like over the top that people don't want to buy emergency food, water, or electronics. And I always think that's crazy. How often do you put on a Band-Aid? Like seriously, people rarely ever do. But you still have them. What's the difference between that and some canned food or like a solar phone charger? There's literally no difference. That can save your life, having, emergency provisions. So I think it's silly that people get self-conscious about doing this stuff. They joked that I was buying the van because I was saying like the end is, and I'm like, dude, I bought the van so I can go chill out in the wilderness and like watch the deer frolic by the lake. That's it. And I can work while I do it. But admittedly, it's great to have my own independent power source where I can plug things in and do work if the power goes out. Or if I want to just drive to the park and work at the park. It's fun. So let's read a little bit more about this. He says, it's a question of not if it will happen, but when. The U.S. government is so rightly fearful of this that last November it ordered DARPA to wargame a complete cyber takedown of the U.S. power grid, an exercise they are now wisely running on a regular basis. According to DHS, just last year, hackers strongly suspected to be Russian gained access to a number of utility control rooms in the U.S. and got to the point where they could have thrown switches. And this is what may prevent war, mutually assured destruction, because we're all locked into each other's grids with So he says, the clock is ticking. Unfortunately, much like any large attack, when an extended regional or national blackout hits, you and your family will be on your own. No one is going to ride to the rescue. How will you survive? In the blink of an eye, you will lose access to money, food, gas, communications, medicine, etc. We get it. Gone. Even though most don't do it, residents of California and Florida are reminded every year to assemble their 2-week survival kit. In California, it's because of earthquakes. In Florida, hurricanes. Survival kits, which include water, non-perishable food, medicine, first aid, batteries, radio, flashlight. He goes on. He likes doing these lists. I'm not going to read the lists. The federal and state governments should be issuing that same reminder to every citizen in the nation about the coming blackout. It truly is not a question of if, but when. A night on the town for a movie, dinner, a sporting event, or a political debate is great fun until none of it matters and your survival is literally at stake. Make a plan, because you will be on your own. I'll end by saying this. A story on Mount Everest I talked about before. People were dying. They had no oxygen. They were collapsing. And one woman said she thought about sharing her air and said, you know what? No, I'm not going to die for them. And that's what it will be like when resources are finite. Stick around. I got one more video coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you there.